my life was turned upside down. The rug was pulled out from under me. I would inject the drug at 10 o'clock and then at 2 o'clock, violent chills and fever, nausea. It was just horrific. So I went back to him and I said, I can't do this. This is crazy. For the first time in my life, I started to connect this dot between, you know, diet and disease.
Yeah.
We could reduce the risk of breast cancer by 50%.
This is the Promise of Possibility podcast, sharing stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things so you can be inspired to do so too. I'm Maruja Bogaard. Now let's dive in. Oh, I am so happy to be here with you, Saray. It is so good to have you on the podcast. I always say stories are the greatest source of inspiration, and there is no greater story than yours. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. What an honor to kick off this podcast with you. We've known each other for a few years now, and I think you're an extraordinary woman for so many. And so for me, it's a great honor to join you today and to be part of this first podcast. Am I right?
You are right. And it's like, it couldn't be better because I think, and we have known each other for almost 3 years now, which is crazy. And I do have to say that this podcast is actually an after effects, if that's a good word, of of the inspiration that you have been to me. Because, and I will talk about this a little later on in the podcast, but if it weren't for your story and the way you've inspired me, I would not have, well, maybe it would have taken longer. Maybe I would have gotten back. I guess, when something's meant for you, it is meant for you. But you propelled me to get back on the stage. And this podcast is actually a part of me being back. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Wow. Well, that I feel very special knowing that I got you back on stage because we all need to hear you behind that microphone, projecting
No.
your beautiful voice. And the first time I heard you, I was like, why is this woman not on a stage every night?
Aw.
You need to make
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Well, without further ado, because I keep mentioning your story
sure.
and your story is incredible. So would you mind taking us back? I think it's 1995.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. 1995, I am a third year medical resident, which it means it's nearly the end of my internal medicine residency after 4 years of medical school and now 3 years of residency. And I guess I could best describe that period of my life as just hectic and overworked and not sleeping and eating. Just think about how you're
Yes.
working 24-hour shifts, 36-hour shifts. And so it was a very stressful time in my life.
Yeah.
And so now it's October 11th, 1995, and I'm on call at the hospital, and it's a really busy, crazy night. And then around 3 o'clock in the morning, I finally find a window to take a nap. And I get to the call room, I pass out. The minute my head hit that pillows, I'm so tired. Within a half an hour, I get paged to address another emergent situation. And when I try to get up out of that sleeping position, an extraordinary thing happened. I couldn't feel my legs. And
Wow.
so just like that, everything just what is happening? I'm terrified. My heart's racing. Next thing I know, I'm in the ER undergoing an MRI of my brain and spinal cord. And
Good
they
God.
tell me it's a diagnosis of multiple sclerosis. And so I just turned 28 years old on the brink of starting my career as, my dream was
Yes.
to
Yeah.
become a
Yeah.
physician. And now this doctor is telling me you have this chronic degenerative disease, and at best, within 15 to 20 years, you'll be in a wheelchair. So,
That's insane. Can you tell, just for the ones who don't know what MS is, can you give
uh,
a little explanation of what kind of
sir,
illness it is?
multiple sclerosis is an autoimmune disease and it attacks the brain and spinal cord. So, it results in neurological loss. So, things like numbness and tingling, a weakness in your legs, your bladder, complications with your bladder. You can lose your vision. So it's a progressive disease and ultimately leads to inability to walk and or, at first dependent on a cane or something like that. So and as a physician, I knew what MS was, having seen patients with this disease, and so my life was turned upside down. And here I went from somebody who had everything available, like all of my dreams were about to launch.
Yeah.
The rug was pulled out from under me, and so um, then came a period of depression and loss. And my doctors, I remember being in the hospital and reviewing the MRI with them, and I could see all of these lesions in my brain and in my spinal cord. There was so much disease. And I remember him telling me that at this point in my life, this degree of disease would most likely result in my dependency on a in a wheelchair within 10 to 20 years. And so that's really what um just struck me. And I was
Yours.
yeah, it
And
was
at 28, I mean, that must I mean, you're in the prime of your life, like you said, you're at the pinnacle of, like, reaching this goal that you've been working on for so long, and then that, you know, this completely comes from left out
was
of left field.
not supposed to happen, right?
No,
Little
of course.
things, and all of a sudden, this is what you're where you are. And so
Yeah.
um
What were the next few years like?
yeah, so immediately starting medication to slow the progression of the disease. So at the time, there was only one. I remember the doctor saying to me, "You're actually pretty lucky because the very first drug um, to slow the progression of MS has just been approved by the FDA,
Yeah.
so you have
Okay.
access to it." So great. But the problem was when I started the medication, it was an injectable drug. I had to inject every day, and I was told to inject the drug late at night because the side effects. The idea was that you would sleep through them. And so, what
Yeah.
were the side effects? The side effects were flu-like illness, so fever, chills, muscle aches and pains, nausea, vomiting, hair loss, depression,
Oh my
suicidal.
god.
It was like this laundry list
It's
of
like sounds like one of those commercials.
yes,
Side
uh,
effects may include oh my god.
right. And he was just like, "It'll be fine. Just do it right before you go to bed, and you'll just sleep through them." And of course, I didn't
Goodness
sleep through them.
gracious.
I
Yeah.
would inject the drug at 10 o'clock, and then at 2 o'clock in the morning, I would awaken with, like, violent chills and fever and just on, nausea. It was just horrific. And
Oh,
so, after doing this for a couple of weeks, I didn't think I could do it much longer, so I went back to him and I said, "I can't do this. This is crazy." And meanwhile, I'm still a doctor, I'm still a resident, I still have to fulfill what my responsibility is in that
yeah,
role. And
yeah.
so he says to me, "Well, what we'll do is we'll treat the side effects with other drugs."
With other drugs, good lord.
Right? So when I couldn't
Yeah,
sleep, he gave me a prescription for Ambien. When I couldn't wake up, he gave me a prescription for Provigil, which is like an amphetamine-like drug. And
yeah.
uh, before I knew it, with this um, formula, within a few months, I was taking about 12 drugs.
Oh my
So
god.
I would leave the house with a pill box, uh, and despite all of the medicines that I was taking, the disease was progressing, and I was having regular exacerbations. And you
Wow,
know, long story short, within a few years, I was dependent on a cane,
wow.
sometimes a diaper, and grossly depressed. Just um, hopeless, which is the worst thing that you could encounter is losing hope.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
And somehow, despite all of this that I was going through, I managed to fight through and complete my residency, go on to do a fellowship in infectious diseases, and um, try to live this life. It was compromised, but
Yeah,
somehow I just
but you were still and you were, you had a great job. I mean, you were still working as an internal medicine specialist and an infectious disease
yeah.
specialist,
Right.
correct?
So I after that, I went on to do a fellowship in infectious diseases, and then when I finished that, I was hired as the chief of infectious diseases at a BA in New York, which was a
Okay.
wonderful opportunity. And I don't know how really when I look back in retrospect how
How
I
did
muscled
it?
through that, but it was just brute strength. And I'm a strong person, and
Extraordinarily strong person.
I don't know how at times I managed to battle through, but I did. Um, but I knew things were going south, and
Mhm.
I could see what my doctor had um told me when I was diagnosed in 1995, how that wheelchair was in my future, and
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
beginning to accept it, and trying to do my best, taking one day at a time, sort of living. Um, Sometimes I had better days, other days were harder, and I tried to focus on the good days.
Well, and by now you were married and had 2 children, right?
So at this point, I'm married, and I have one child. So and then you know, I had when I had my first child, um, believe it or not, I actually felt better because when you during pregnancy actually protects auto.
Okay,
Yeah. So
that's interesting.
so it gives you like a window of improvement. So the
Mhm.
pregnancy, it's what follows is postpartum is the difficult part.
You know.
So yeah, so after I had my son Nicholas, I definitely worsened pretty precipitously. And
Mhm.
then so now we're at 2003, and um I'm probably at my worst. And
Wow.
I'm in my office, and by chance, I see a throwaway journal, and on the cover of the journal, I see multiple sclerosis and the word blueberries. And I think to myself, well, what the world do blueberries have to do with multiple? This is crazy. So I pick it up and I read it, and it's like it's a really poorly um, controlled study, but essentially the study looked at a group of MS patients and fed one. Um, Group a diet rich in blueberries, and then the other group just a normal standard American diet. And they go on to conclude, after a very relatively short period of time, that the MS patients who consumed the blueberries had some improvement, like they felt better. No, I mean, again, not a very good scientific study, and it was just and I was a researcher to see
Yeah.
something like this published. And again, it was published in a throwaway, is not the New England Journal of Medicine, so I'm sure.
Yeah.
But that silly blueberry study that afternoon was what I call my aha moment.
Uh,
You know, it was that moment that, like, all of a sudden there was light, and
uh,
something
what
was,
you had.
for the first time in my life, I started to connect this dot between, you know, diet and
Yeah.
disease. And
Yeah.
could there be a connection? And it sounds crazy because here I was, dual board certified attending physician. And I didn't know anything about food or about
I was just I was just gonna ask, it was that at any point in during your time in med school that anybody said that diet and disease that there's a link between the 2?
no, which is extraordinary that this is not at all an important part of our medical education. And this
Yeah.
idea of preventive medicine and the important role that it plays is not part of our education. And so I had to, it, that little article then led me on this exploration, this insatiable appetite to learn as much as I could about this idea of diet and the role that it plays. And not only diet, but other aspects of our lifestyles that are so important, like, you know,
Like what?
exercise and stress management. I was a highly stressed young. I started to think about, what did I do to contribute to the development of this disease?
Right.
Did I do something? Was there something in my life that had contributed to allowing this disease to evolve?
Mhm.
And as I delved deeper and deeper into the literature, I learned the importance of what stress was doing to multiple sclerosis,
Wow.
what benefits I could reap if exercise were part of my daily activities. What about my sleep? What role did sleep have? I was the worst sleeper. If you would have asked me in 2003, I would have categorized my sleeping behavior as insomnia. I mean, I couldn't sleep at night, and that's why they gave me prescriptions to sleep. So everything was, Ativan, a benzodiazepine, or a hypnotic like Ambien. And so I
Wow.
became addicted to those medications. So I became dependent on them. So I
Yeah.
didn't know how to
Yeah.
sleep without them.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel well the next day. Like, I would sleep, it would knock me out. But the next day I didn't feel regenerated.
Energized or like
Or
yeah.
but the other advantage of taking that drug was I didn't have to, it would knock me out. So all of those thoughts that one has when they're going to bed, the stress,
Mhm.
the anxiety, the depression, the sadness over the loss of control of my own body, I didn't have to go through that exercise. I could just
It was numbing in every way, basically.
yeah, which is not
Yeah.
good. We
No.
need we need
No.
to feel pain in our lives is important, and
Yeah,
that's something
absolutely.
that I want.
Physically and emotionally.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Yeah.
we need to feel that,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, in order to grow, in order to I mean, it's such an important and, our culture right now is all about numbing pain, and that's something I think we need to, look at. But so
Absolutely.
that's where I was, and then again, long story short, all of this evidence, I just got excited. I saw potential. I saw an opportunity, a pathway for maybe some improvement with this
Yeah.
disease. And I remember going to my doctor equipped with all of this information that I had gathered, like binders
And
of articles,
excited, I'm sure.
like,
Yeah.
to share it with him. There was a physician named Roy Swank who years ago had published data with MS patients, followed them over 30 years, and found that patients who were on this primarily plant based diet had better outcomes. And this was published literature. So, anyway, he had never talked to me about this. I had never heard about this. In medical school, we cover multiple sclerosis. We cover risk of multiple sclerosis and treatment, but none of this was ever discussed. So I was like, wow, maybe I found something that no one else knows. So I came to him again, lots of excitement on that day, and he just looked at me with this look of pity,
Oh,
of
my God.
wow. He was just he looked disappointed.
Oh my God.
And that was hard too because he was like a mentor to me.
Yeah.
Beyond being my physician, before he was my physician, he was a mentor at my medical school. Anyway, he said, "This is BS. This is
Oh my God.
don't waste your time with this. What you need to do is stay on your medicine, take it every day, just as prescribed, and that's your best shot of slowing the progression of this disease." So, I went home, shed tears, felt bad
Ugh,
about myself, then experienced a little bit of pain, but
yeah.
then I picked myself up and I said, you're not stupid.
No. You're a
Um,
doctor too.
I'm a doctor too,
Yeah.
and this is my body, this is my life, and I'm going to make a decision that's going to serve me.
Yeah.
You may not agree with me, but this is what I'm going to do. So I sat down over, I think a week or two, and I put together a plan what I'm going to do. Uh, and I told everybody in my family, and a lot of people in my family were scared. Uh,
I'm
And,
sure.
"Are
I'm
you sure
sure.
you're gonna do this?" And, my parents were not thrilled with my approach, but I said, "I need everyone to support me. This
Yeah.
is what I'm gonna do." And so I started cleaning my diet and introducing all of those wonderful, healthful, colorful foods, rich in antioxidants, those plant-based foods that were gonna deliver fiber and all those nutrients that I knew were gonna be important to feed my cells.
Mhm.
I couldn't at this point do much more than get onto a stationary bike. I was walking with a cane or a walker, so I had my balance issues. I couldn't go out and walk or go on a hike or run or
Yeah.
anything like that. So I had to start out very slow. My husband bought me a stationary bike. He would carry me onto it.
Oh
I would
my God.
do a minute or two, and then he would carry me off, and I would be in pain, exhausted. It would take 15 to 20 minutes to recover from that, but the next day I'd get back on the bike. Every day I did that minute on that bike. Whatever it
Amazing.
took, I did it. And then it turned into a minute and like 3 seconds. And then a minute,
Amazing.
10 seconds. And that's another thing. We always want results overnight.
Right away,
Not
especially this generation, right? Where I don't
yeah,
wanna
yeah.
pin it on this trend, but because everything is so instant right now,
And so
we just want the results
yeah,
immediately.
it doesn't work that way. I'm sorry. You
No.
have to put in the work. And, and I did. And so I went from that person to again it wasn't overnight. 7 years later, I crossed the finish line at a marathon, which is
It's just, I
when you
mean,
look at it from a bird's eye view, it looks pretty, amazing,
it
but
is
that was a
amazing.
lot of work
Yeah.
and a lot
A
of
lot of 1 minutes
yeah,
compounded over each other and on top of each other.
trial a lot of trial and failure, and I even a year into my lifestyle change, I even had a flare. I had a setback. And then, of course, everyone was like, "Oh, you did the wrong thing." My doctor was like, "I told you." But
Yeah.
I knew something was changing. I knew something was happening. So I just kept going. And then yeah, things just came together for me. And I had all of a sudden my life, and I
Yeah.
felt so
Just
empowered.
extraordinary.
Yeah.
Extraordinary, yeah.
And,
And that fueled a passion. I mean, it's clear that you already had a huge passion for helping, people with illnesses and infectious disease. I think I heard you mention before that it was right around the time that AIDS came on the scene and you wanted to help people with AIDS. So you were clearly already very passionate about helping people. But this, did it kind of, the impact that it had, you being a physician but at the same time being a patient
yeah.
at the mercy of physicians, when you became empowered because you found that this change in lifestyle had such extraordinary results for you, how did that impact you as a physician? Like what happened then?
Yeah, I suddenly said, "This is magic. This is power. I have to tell everybody this," you know? So then in my HIV clinic and my hepatitis, so I did a lot of hepatitis C treatment,
Okay.
and I would speak to my veterans who were being managed for these other diseases and talk to them about the importance of diet and life. So everyone would, "Why is the ID doctor talking about diet and lifestyle?" Um, but it was something I needed to do, and I was deeply passionate about it, and the
Yeah.
funny thing is that so many of my patients would join in. Like, I started a walking club at the VA, so every day at lunchtime, I would meet in front of the hospital, and we were on this beautiful campus right on the Hudson River, and we would walk a mile, and I would invite
Mhm.
anyone to come join us. And so
Well,
many of my veteran, patients would be there, and we would go on these beautiful walks, and not only get that physical activity in, but also these social connections that which is also medicine, right? That's one of the spokes on the
yes.
lifestyle medicine wheel. So we would talk about they would share things about their family, their friends. Many of the vets that would go on these walks would then say, "Let's get together and do something." So they would make friends there, so we would plant
All
seeds
one
there,
one.
and then grow and do other things together. So, I started doing, lifestyle medicine classes at the VA on my free time, and I
Amazing.
saw so many of my patients coming off of their, uh, diabetes medication or their blood pressure medication, or, I don't think I need that, antidepressant anymore. I'm feeling really good, Dr. Stanzik. So I was working with one of the clinical psychologists at the VA, and we were really making a difference, and I was so excited about it. Um, and then I think at some point, and I went on to do other things in the field of infectious diseases, but at some point I had this lingering feeling that I needed to do this like full time. I mean,
Mm.
I loved the work in infectious diseases, and I contributed almost 18 years of my career to that. But I needed to do this full time, and it wasn't just delivering this type of medicine, uh, to patients as their doctor, but it was also wanting to fix the type of education, the quality of the education that we were receiving in medical schools. Like, I
Mhm.
couldn't
Mhm.
believe that this was not an important part of
Curriculum.
medical education. Like, every physician should have this skill set. Of course, we need to, have this arsenal of medications that are incredibly important in the management of disease, and that we have all this expertise with procedures and surgical interventions. Of course, that's important, but if you could prevent the disease, that's where we have to focus. I mean, prevent
Yes, absolutely. And when you say, well, I mean, was there no part of your education that talked about nutrition? Was that not part of the curriculum?
no, I mean, no aspect of their medical education, taught, place any emphasis or discuss nutrition. I mean, when we had any module on nutrition, it was really about vitamin deficiencies,
Mhm.
like or scurvy or beriberi, which are you don't see those
No.
in
Yeah.
developed countries. But it was those biochemical deficiencies that we had brief lecturing on, but there was no diet, the role that diet plays in disease formation and in allowing for individuals to live optimally and to age gracefully. In our
Right.
country,
Which is the dream, right?
yeah, I mean, right.
Yeah.
That's the hope for each and every one of us. I mean, that's really been my if we could empower individuals to feel well and to be free of chronic disease, and we can, there's evidence in the literature. There was a study published back in 2009. It's called the Potsdam study that showed that when we adopt these four healthy behaviors, right? So, what are they? Eating a healthy diet, a plant based diet, exercising about 30 minutes every day, maintaining a healthy weight, and not smoking. If you do that, this study showed that 80% of the chronic diseases that we see today, commonly heart disease, diabetes, could be prevented. That's
80%.
80%. Yeah. I mean, when you see stuff like that, and again, this is legitimate publications, legitimate scientists publishing this data. Um, how is this ignored?
Yeah.
And why have we become so dependent on this pharmaceutical regimen that is just um, I'm incredibly doing a lot of damage, I think.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm just gonna interrupt you for a brief moment here because it's this really rang true to me when I first came across. So I got into I got a glimpse of lifestyle medicine and especially plant-based eating about 6.5 years ago. And I had a client and I did a conference for them and it was about patient empowerment. So I was doing a lot of research on the topic and then came across this and came across one of your talks. And then I remember after I heard your talk, I was like, oh my God, because I lost, as you know, I lost my parents and it was due to lifestyle illnesses because my mom had diabetes and actually it runs rampant in my family. And it's not, I'm from Curacao, from the Caribbean. We're both Caribbean.
Yes.
Uh, Cubana. It is Cubana. And, you know, especially diabetes and heart disease is like it's very prominent in our cultures.
For sure.
And I knew that for myself, I had two little kids. I did not want them, to have to go through what I went through. And also my father, I mean, he smoked when he was like, much younger. And of course,
You
you
were told this is genetic.
yeah,
I mean, we patients didn't know at the time that they could do something. Well, how
yeah.
would they know that? They because their doctors weren't telling them. Uh,
No, exactly. And for me, it was like this talking about an aha moment. For me, it was like this aha moment. I was like, I don't want to end up like that. If it is genetic, I do not want to end up with diabetes. And so I adopted a plant-based lifestyle. And I consumed all the information that I could. And for me, besides me really taking a look at my health and, it started with my physical health. And I think that's why I think this is so important because your physical health, not only if you have an illness, like a chronic illness or an autoimmune disease or anything like that, but also if you're healthy, just being your best self, I think is
exactly.
the core of doing anything that you want to achieve in life. Because I think if you want to be a great entrepreneur or a great artist or a great whatever you want to do, it starts with your physical and your mental and your emotional health. Because you have to be the best version of yourself to be able to give, to your audience, whoever that audience may be. So for me, it was really the catalyst, me changing my outlook on my health and adopting this lifestyle. It did so many things for me, and that's why I keep saying you're like this incredible inspiration because it not only did I get healthier, a lot of people don't know this, and I've shared this with you, but I had an eating disorder when I was younger, and I'd love to talk about that because if in any way it's helpful for anybody or anybody who has children or that maybe teenagers or young adults that have an eating disorder, and I struggled. I mean, there were low points, like very, very low points, and I was hospitalized. But even after, when you think, I've kind of recovered mentally, it's still something that, stays with you. And
Right.
it wasn't until I adopted a plant-based lifestyle, like I started, and I mean, I would say at this moment, I'm 90% plant-based or 95% because,
Yeah.
it's not always easy. But
Yeah.
I adore the colorful plate. I adore it.
Yeah.
And it was then like, it changed my relationship with food because I used to have this love-hate relationship with food. It changed my relationship with food. It also, because of my eating disorder, I had stomach issues my entire life. Like, after that, I had to take Nexium, like stomach medications for years and years and years. And my stomach problems almost disappeared. So it's like it was the mental benefits, the physical benefits, and also because of that, it also led to me, starting this process of I can heal from the grief of my parents and actually see this future of me being on stage again. And then along came you and said, you should be on stage. So it's just for me, it was like extraordinary. And that's why I think it's such an important message. And which leads me to this, because
Yeah.
you didn't stop at just, opening your practice and starting to, talk to patients and work with them like longer than just 10 minutes ago. But you shared your message with the world. And not only with this incredible book, but also with a movie that was aimed towards doctors, right? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Code Blue was really where I had a film director approach me who had heard my story, and we talked about the the story that I just shared with you, and how it led to this practice this lifestyle medicine. And I opened one of the first lifestyle medicine practices in the country, so I'm really proud of that. Uh,
Yeah.
and she had heard from patients the changes that had come into their lives and how they were able to come off their diabetes drugs or gain some great benefits. So she was really interested in hearing how that came to be and why I was so passionate about this discipline. And I said to her that I had been at this point um, volunteering at the medical school. I was trying to teach this discipline in for students again as a volunteer, but I because I couldn't get the dean of the medical school to agree that it was important enough to be part of the curriculum. So I said, okay, well then I'll just come. And any student who's interested in hearing it is welcome to attend, and students were interested. They were interested in the idea of preventive medicine. So anyway, I said to her, one of my deepest passions is not only serving the community and allowing them to improve the quality of their lives, but I also want to bring this attention to our next generation of physicians and healthcare professionals, so that
Mhm.
they too can not only benefit from this for themselves, but then they in turn will share this message with their patients, right? So the
Right.
way that so that's what the name of the book is. What's missing from medicine? This is
It
missing.
is. Yeah. And I mean, you actually had doctors that came to you as patients as well, right? When they saw
Yeah,
their patients, like,
yeah,
make this transformation.
yeah. And I think that's in large part why the film was so important to me, because I had patients that would get better. Let's say a diabetic got better, then went to see their endocrinologist for their 6-month visit. And then, oh my God, their hemoglobin A1C is 5.7. They've come off 3 of their medications and you look good, you feel good, you've lost weight. What are you doing? And then the patient would say, I'm seeing Dr. Stancic. She's a lifestyle medicine doctor. And she's taught me about the importance of my diet and exercise and sleep and stress. And she's helped me to understand how they're all interrelated and they're codependent. And if I do this, I can live a happier and healthier life. And so the doctor's like, "Who is this person? Give me her number?" And then they would call me up and they almost sounded angry, like, "What are you?" And then I would say, "Give me your email address. I'm gonna send you some articles
Mhm.
so that you can read it." And so they would call me back and say, I wanna come see you." Okay. So I'm thinking it's just we're gonna meet for a cup of tea as peers, professionals.
Yes.
No, I wanna make an appointment to see you because I'm overweight, my blood pressure's too high, I'm depressed, I can't sleep, and I wanna know if you can help me." So
Mhm.
it started that way.
Amazing.
Then
Yeah.
before I knew it, I had close to 40, 50 patients that were doctors in my practice, and I had nurses and I had psychologists. And what is wonderful about, I mean, any patient that I have that I can serve is great. But when you have a patient who's also in the field, that pays off in dividends, right? Because then they change and
Yes.
they affect. So for each
And
doctor,
they'll bring it over to their patients.
exactly. So that
Yeah.
doctor who's serving, 800 patients in his
Yeah.
practice, all of a
Yeah.
sudden he's now introduced this idea of lifestyle medicine and preventive medicine into the way he or she practices medicine. So that was wow. So all of a sudden I felt like I'm not only I'm affecting this change on a
Yeah.
scale. And
Amazing.
I do, so I was writing articles and doing interviews and doing everything I could, sharing my story wherever anybody would be interested in hearing it. And then the film came to be, and we traveled all over the country and we put together this film that really spoke to the evidence and shared patient stories, and shared experts in the field. And for me, the hope is that the film will serve to change medical education on a grand scale,
Yeah.
and also change the way we think that, this antiquated idea that we're susceptible to our genes and our genes predict everything. No, they don't. Genes play a role for sure, but nothing is more powerful than what you do day in and day out. What do you choose to do today that is going to serve your betterment? There's a really important interview that I did in the film with Graham Culditz. He's a breast cancer researcher for like 50 years at this point. He started out at Harvard and he's at Washington University now. When I interviewed him, he was at Washington University, so we flew out to interview him. And the reason I wanted to interview him because he had written an article that I read several years ago, which really struck me, which I thought was extraordinary. In the article, he writes that breast cancer the risk for breast cancer begins, we just started Women's History Month, so I think this is
Yes.
appropriate.
Yes. It's perfect.
Um, Breast cancer, he says, the risk begins at menarche. So when you get your first period, right? So that's when risk begins. And he said, if we educated young girls at menarche and explain to them the importance of eating a plant-rich diet, the importance of those colorful foods that we talked about, and we talked to them about the importance of avoiding or reducing alcohol consumption.
Mhm.
And we talked to them about the importance of maintaining a healthy weight,
Mhm.
not a weight of that from deprivation, but a healthy weight. And the importance of all the things we talk about in lifestyle medicine. If we talk to young women, we could reduce the risk of breast cancer by 50% just by doing that. By
That is
and what
amazing.
was and no one talks about that, Maruja. I Every October we wear pink, and it's
Yeah.
Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and here in the U.S. football players wear pink, and there's a lot of
Yeah. Yeah.
tension. And it's all about get your mammogram. Okay, of course we should get our mammogram. That's
Yes.
important. No, but imagine if we took that opportunity with all that marketing and all that attention
Hearts. Yeah.
and say, let's talk about what we're eating,
Yeah.
how it's affecting our risk of developing these diseases. I think we could make such a big dent, and then we could prevent all of this pain and suffering that we see down the line. Like, a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old girl's not thinking about herself when she's 40 or 50,
No, of course. Yeah.
but um, but we need to have those conversations because we could prevent so much morbidity and mortality by doing that. And again, these are the questions that I tried to seek answers to in the film. Like, why do we have all of this information, all of this evidence available to us, and we're not screaming from mountaintops?
Mhm. Yeah. The
No,
film
there's
is
question.
beautiful. The film is absolutely beautiful. And you mentioned earlier when you thought to yourself, like, what was it that I did that contributed to me developing MS? Or sometimes we might feel, and I think that's such a beautiful attitude to have. Sometimes we might feel like we're blaming ourselves. It's not a blame. It's actually an empowerment if you
Yep.
can, right? If you can think and say, okay, if I do these things, which are not hard to do, right? They're not hard to do. And it's beautiful the way you talk about it in the book, because you often hear about the pillars of lifestyle medicine, but you talk about it as if
Mhm.
it's a wheel and the
Yeah.
spoke is a wheel. Like if one is missing or if one is not like in balance, the wheel
Right.
is wonky and
Right.
doesn't really. Can you actually talk a little bit about that so that and also, you know, people might think, "Oh, does that mean I have to go vegan?" Or,
Yeah.
it can you
Yeah.
talk a
So
little bit about that
yeah.
so they'd realize it's not as extreme as they might think,
Yeah.
you
So
know?
the things I just want to backtrack for a second because you said when I was asking the question, did I do anything? This is not
Mhm.
and this is one of the criticism I received. Like you're blaming the patient. No,
Mhm.
I'm not blaming the patient. What I'm trying to do is empower the patient.
Exactly, exactly.
Uh, I mean, if you know that cigarettes cause lung cancer and you continue to smoke the cigarettes, then I
That's
haven't. That's on you.
it's an
Um,
informed decision, right?
Right.
It's an informed decision.
When your dad was smoking cigarettes, when like nearly 50% of Americans in the 1960s were smoking cigarettes, they didn't really know that it was
No,
causing lung cancer and
no.
COPD and all this other stuff because it was
Yeah,
being held back. We were being
yeah,
lied to, right?
yeah,
But when you
exactly.
know better, this is
You
what
do better.
you do better, right? So that's the point that I'm saying. The idea is to educate and empower. And then
Mhm.
it's your choice what you wanna do. I mean, there are people who, will say to me, "I don't care. I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do," and that's fine. It's a free country, and you can make that choice. As a physician, I'm gonna present options to you, and I'm gonna try to do my best to educate you and offer
Yeah.
you, what the evidence speaks to. Now, the reason, my lifestyle medicine colleagues often use pillars, and I love pillars because when I think of a pillar, I think of strength, right? And
Yeah.
something that is gonna really hold you. The reason I like the wheel and the spokes is because I wanna evoke that imagery of there being this interdependence or codependence on these, lifestyle factors.
Mhm.
Uh, the reason I say that is because so many of us, are really good at, for example, our diet. Some
Mhm.
people are, over the top obsessed with every morsel. I don't think that's a good idea either that you put into your mouth. But then
Yeah.
those very same people, and this has been my experience over nearly 30 years of practice, and particularly the last 15 when I was focused on this type of practice, where they're obsessed with every morsel that they eat. But then they drink 3 glasses of wine and they don't exercise and they can't sleep. Right? So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, what we wanna do is address every aspect. So each spoke on that lifestyle as you described, and I'm sure I wrote this in the book, when all the spokes are aligned and they're moving together, you're gonna make forward movement, right?
Exactly,
If you have a
exactly.
spoke that's sort of out there wonky,
And
that wheel
wonky.
is not gonna move forward. So that's
Yeah.
the imagery, I'm a very visual person, so that's what I'm
Yes,
trying
love
to
it.
offer the individuals reading it. Like, you really wanna have that smooth ride, and the way that you achieve that smooth ride and it's not easy,
No.
is to address like, you almost have to have a checklist. So, the 6 spokes of lifestyle medicine are diet, right?
Mhm.
Physical activity, stress management, social interconnection, right? Substance abuse issues, sleep hygiene. I think that's all did I say I think I might have said all 6. So, it's about making sure that each and every day you're addressing each aspect so that you can optimize every when they come together, it's like a symphony, right? All of it all come the whole, is greater than the sum of the parts, right? So when you do that, that's when you achieve your best self. And you said this earlier, like, how do I achieve my best version of Maruja so I can do all of those things, so I can
Exactly.
address all of those aspects of my lifestyle and achieve my dreams. And
Yep.
and the best way to do that is to take um care of every aspect of that lifestyle because then
Yep.
you're gonna arrive at that.
Yeah, yeah, and it's so beautifully said, and for me, it has absolutely changed my life, and I am so grateful for there have been many. You were one of the pioneers, and now it's like more, people talk about it more, lifestyle medicine and, and plant-based eating has become almost, it's not as hard to find vegan food anymore, even though, there's vegan eating and then there's plant-based, right? Like Whole Foods plant-based, because of course we have the fake meat and the fake, but okay, if that's an avenue for people to transition, to make the transition easier,
Yeah.
that's
Okay. I don't. I'm not a big fan of the word vegan.
mhm,
And there are so there are multiple reasons behind why someone might be vegan. There's
yes,
certainly the environmental aspect of this and animal
yes,
aspect, all of which is important. Um,
yes,
I, that's not why I come at this from my perspective as a physician. So, and you don't have to be. I mean, I am 100% plant based.
mhm,
But you don't have to be strictly 100% plant-based to gain the benefit of good nutrition. You want to eat, and I write about this in the book. Like if you're reluctant to remove the animal from your plate, at least make it the side dish, right? So we've always learned that the animal is the main event, right? So when
mhm,
you go to a wedding, right, and they tell you to choose, what do you want, the steak, the chicken, or the fish?
it's
They
yeah,
don't ask you, do you want the sweet potato, the broccoli, or the
it's true. No,
right? So
true,
we need to sort of turn that around, upside down. And so
yeah,
the plant, the vegetable, the grain, those are the main events, right?
yeah,
And so if you're going to have that animal source on your plate, let it be the minority. And so what happens is naturally over time, as you start to consume more of these fiber-rich foods, again, rich in all those nutrients that allow for optimal health and bathe your cells in all the good things that they need, preventing the things that they don't need, you just start feeling better and you tend to want more of that. I mean, that's
absolutely,
when something
yeah,
feels good and you tend to do more of it, right?
yeah. For me, it just makes me happy when you see all those colors on
And
your
you
plate. It's like,
right.
it's
All the
amazing.
colors. I mean, when you go into the supermarket and you walk into that produce aisle and you see the green and the reds and the blues and the purple, these are all phytonutrients that are giving these colors, and they're so important in our health. And then the fiber that is found only in plant-based foods feeds those that microbiome, those organisms in our gut, which we know are so important.
Yeah.
And we're learning more and more every day about
Also for our brains, for everything. It's for
for every
everything.
all. And you mentioned this before, when you started eating a certain way, everything else, maybe
Yeah.
maybe
Place.
it falls into place, or maybe a person decides to eat healthier because of their diabetes, but then guess what? They've just reduced their risk of Alzheimer's disease. They've just reduced their risk of breast cancer. There's so many benefits. They might have address some excess weight that they were carrying. So
Yeah.
there are a myriad of benefits to adopting a healthier lifestyle. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah,
I wanna mention this, you and I have spoken about this before, and I see of my peers around me mention this more and more, and especially because it's Women's Month, it's our month,
yeah,
and people are speaking about something that used to be taboo, and that's perimenopause and menopause,
yeah,
right? And I am smack dab in the middle of perimenopause, and your whole world changes, like, everything changes. It feels like you have no control over your body, over your thoughts, the way you're acting. What I did realize in retrospect that I started having hot flashes like 7 years ago. I didn't really realize, and most of it went away when I became plant-based. Like, this is thinking back. So now I'm 52, I'm gonna be 53, and these things are coming back. But I know that when doing the research now, because I always want to be empowered and I want to be able to make the right decisions for me to feel as good as I can again. I hear a lot about the anti-inflammatory diet or an anti-inflammatory lifestyle. And what you're talking about is an anti-inflammatory lifestyle. Is that right?
yeah, absolutely. There are so many trends and fad diets that I don't even like the term plant-based diet. The
Mhm.
idea that we just want to eat more like our great grandmothers did, stay away from the processed foods, like not foods that when you bring something home and it's packaged and it's gone through I don't know how many steps to get to you.
Yeah.
Like, whereas our great-great-grandmothers, right, they just went to the farm and they pulled it out of the ground. I mean, my
Yeah.
grandma did in Cuba. Um, things were very, very simple, and,
Mhm.
it was like one step in processing before it made it to the plate. Uh,
Yeah.
and and that's, incredibly important. The foods that we eat today, I refer to them as food stuff. It's not real food.
Mhm.
I see what kids are eating. They're eating those, uh, Lunchables, I mean, these are it's like plastic. I don't even know what's in there. It's like,
It's so easy. You can call them Lunchables because 'cause they're so easy to put in a lunchbox, right? So
I know they're incredibly
crazy.
unhealthy.
Yeah, for sure.
Processed meat is, right up there with, it's a carcinogen when things that are highly processed like that, particularly
Yeah.
processed meats,
Yeah.
um, type 1 carcinogen. So, we and again, it's important for us to talk to young people so that they
Mhm.
develop healthy habits early on. It's very hard to change someone when they come to see you as a patient when they're 45 and they have heart disease
Yeah.
and diabetes and are morbidly obese, to change their behaviors,
Mhm.
because this is what they've been engaging their whole lives,
Yeah.
in eating in this fashion. To try to change somebody at that point, I mean, people are able to change, but it makes it that much harder. So when we have, our children, and we can introduce these ideas early on, and help them educate why it's really wonderful for you to eat that big, beautiful, bright, salad.
Yeah.
And one of the things I used to do with my kids, every before dinner, we have this big wooden salad bowl, and we always start with a salad. And so I
Oh, yeah.
would I would ask, the kids to start. I mean, you would start with green, so almost like an art project, right? So
Yeah.
how many colors could we add to the
Oh,
salad?
lovely.
As
Yeah.
little kids adding, tomatoes
And
and
peppers and
peppers, yeah, all the beautiful colors, and
yeah.
they would be so excited when they could get
Uh,
more 4 or 5 colors into a salad. Uh,
amazing.
so
That's
in
a
the
brilliant idea. That's a
Yeah,
brilliant idea. Yeah.
so make it fun for kids, and
Yeah.
still, it's not easy. I know, kids are gonna be invited to birthday parties, and they're gonna try and that's okay. I never
Mhm.
told them you can't eat that, but what I did tell them, what explain to them why. I never said you have to eat that vegetable. What you do is you put it in front of them, you eat it, you be the example, and maybe they don't like it the first time,
Mhm.
but maybe it takes another 6 or 7 times for them to try it before, this isn't so bad." But then they grow into teenagers and adults, and, they go off to
To
college like
eat
my
right.
daughter, and
Yes.
she makes really good decisions. She sends me photos, "Mom, look what I'm eating," and she's, like, proud
Amazing.
fact that she's added color to her plate, and
Great.
I have this 20-year-old who's sending me photos of her food.
Amazing.
Yeah, which
That's
is
the truth.
great, but those seeds were planted when she was,
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
and
And
hopefully.
and it's we're talking yeah, you're talking about we talked a lot about nutrition, but also, like, stress adds a lot of inflammation to our body as well, right? I
Well,
mean, I'd love to if you would I mean, talking about stress and how you've managed your MS, you've had a period that stress really, like, made you, like, kind of lose your grounding for a bit. Would
yeah,
you talk
definitely.
about that?
Yeah, sure. So stress is like kryptonite for MS and for autoimmune disease, really. I think for me, stress. One of the lessons I think I learned to help me manage stress was the day I learned the following, that, um, it's okay, when things don't go the right way and when we have bad days, and it's okay, and that's going to happen. Um, and when something unfortunate happens in my life,
Mhm.
uh, as it does in everyone's life. We don't get the thing that we want or we expect, or there's a disappointment, there's loss, that instead of being, distraught or crying or resisting, that we just accept what it is.
Mhm.
And that's easy for me to say. It's
It's a hard thing to do.
a
It's
really
hard to do.
hard thing to do.
Yeah.
It took me years to understand that suffering occurs when we resist what is.
Mhm.
And when you do that, when you're able to say, I'm going to accept this. I'm going to accept this diagnosis. And I'm moving forward. I'm going to do everything I can to figure this out, to empower myself, to allow what is supposed to happen to manifest.
Mhm.
Because ultimately, at the end of the day, everything that happens to us serves a purpose. It shapes us in some way. It leads to the next chapter in our lives. We
Right.
don't, when I, in 1995, on October 12th, the day after I was diagnosed, if you would have said to me, MS is one of the best things that ever happened to you, I would have punched you in the face.
For sure.
Today, nearly 30 years later, I can tell you that yes, it is one of the best things that ever happened to me because yes, I suffered. Yes, there was a lot of pain. Yes, there was a lot of suffering. Um, but it shaped me into who I am today. It's allowed
Mhm.
me to be someone who's contributed, who's helped others, which is really
Absolutely.
what I believe I was put on this planet to serve. Um,
Absolutely.
and it's allowed me to be a better mother. I have a I have a son, a son with special needs, and I've had people say to me, "Oh, I'm really sorry. That must be very hard." There's nothing to be sorry about.
Mm.
He's an extraordinary young man. He's brought so much love into my life.
Mm.
Uh, his life is not what maybe I might have envisioned or what the typical life that you have a child and they go on to college and then they get married and that's not his life. But that doesn't mean that his life is less.
Of
He's
course. Of
he's
course
taken
not.
a different path.
Yeah.
Um, and so accepting and not resisting, I think, is the key to reducing suffering in your life. And knowing that even in those difficult moments, that for whatever reason this is happening and it's going to serve a purpose, you just don't know right now what it is. Trust that it will, it will evolve into where you should go. So,
Absolutely. Amen.
yeah. So, but
Absolutely.
that's not a lesson that you learn overnight. That's a lot of kicks and a lot of
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
when you're getting up, and then
Yeah.
you realizing that no matter how hard you get kicked, and I've been kicked hard, that you manage your way to get up.
Yeah.
With
Yeah.
all of that said, and practicing all these aspects of lifestyle, we all fall off um, the horse at times, and things get hard. In June of 2022, I got COVID. I got sick, very, very sick, like intensely sick. High fever, really bad chills. I think it lasted like 8 hours, during which I thought I was going to die.
Yeah.
But then I was fine.
Mm.
And then about a month later, I woke up after being largely disease free from this MS. I woke up and my balance was off, and I knew right then and there I was having a flare.
Yeah.
And MRI showed a big, big lesion. And wow, that felt like a kick to my stomach. But I
Yeah.
knew definitely the period during COVID was very difficult for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, uh, we had family members that passed away. My mother was in Florida alone. My father had just recently passed away. So, I couldn't visit with her.
Yeah.
Um, just the world had turned up. I mean, I don't need to talk about everybody lived through it
Yeah.
and know what the kids were in school, everything. I had just written the book and I was writing the book at the time, and then the book was released during COVID, so I couldn't do anything to get it out. The movie was released during COVID, so we had
Course.
theaters in LA, New York that were canceled. So everything I had spent all of my energy in,
Yeah.
all of a sudden COVID took it seemingly away.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so again, here's an example of like, wow, I could sit here and simmer and feel sorry for myself,
Yeah.
and suffer, but
Yeah.
instead I decided, I'm going to accept that this is where this is what's supposed to happen, and I'm not going to, battle what is and just move forward. But in 2022, this happened, and then I said, you know what? I was working, traveling so much, um, not sleeping as well as I should. Whenever you travel, particularly when you're going into different time zones, your sleep cycle gets all messed up. And I think in 2020, in between 21 and 22, I visited 30 medical schools. So part of what I was trying to do was lecture at
It's all
medical schools,
yeah. Yeah.
do screenings of Code Blue. and try to impress the importance of this to leadership and deans of medical schools to help them, change what they were doing in school. So I
Yeah.
I was um, doing everything I could to get the word out. And then at some point, I burnt out and I forgot. You have multiple sclerosis. I have never said I'm cured of this disease. I live with
Yeah.
it each and every day. But and I need to take care of myself each and every day. So after this event, I said, "Wake up, no more."
Right.
And for the past year and a half, I have been religiously practicing all those aspects of lifestyle medicine that I write about in the book, just as I write about them.
Yeah.
Not hard. It's not hard. You don't need to spend money on any equipment or do anything. It's simple stuff. It's simple stuff like sleeping, learning how to sleep effectively. Once you get it, I
Mhm.
went from that insomniac to I'm a professional sleeper. I get into
Well,
bed within 10 minutes. I'm sleeping and I sleep
that's
within
amazing.
and I feel great in the morning. And
I can imagine.
that is powerful. I think
Absolutely.
that brought me so much happiness, so much joy to be able to sleep and have recuperative sleep, not ambient sleep, but good sleep.
Yeah, and you're talking the book about how important that is and what happens during the phases of sleep. So
I think
it's
so
restorative in so many ways.
restorative, yeah. And if we when you take medication and you sleep, you're not going through those important
Cycles. Wow.
uh, cycles. Yeah, and so that's why, we need to learn how to sleep, in this country and, Western countries across the world, sleep is a huge problem, and the way that we're addressing the problem is with the prescription pad, which isn't serving. I mean, if you have some acute event, certainly those medications can play a role. You have somebody is killed or something terrible happens, there is a role for those medications, but to be chronically on a sleep
Sleep
aid to
medication. Yeah.
sleep, uh, that's not, a good thing, and you really have to address the the principles of sleep, and how to adopt that environment and that behavior so that you can sleep effectively.
Yeah. So if you were to give advice to anybody listening, somebody who might, they might be working on some of those spokes of the wheel, they might be doing well, some of them less than. What would be an easy way to start? Like for us to tackle our lifestyle in the best way. Like I wouldn't even say our health because it is it's our lives, right? I mean, to really make the changes or implement those habits that will serve us for a lifetime, so that we can be the best version of ourselves.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it would be nice to just sit down, with a journal and write down those 6 spokes and see where you are today, and I write about this in the book, like, where are you? Like, what is your diet right now? What small step could you take? What are you willing to do? That's another question I would have patients when they would come in. Before our first visit, I would send them a form that asked them all these questions, like, "Where are you today? Where do you wanna go? And what is your major what is obstructing that
Mhm.
progress? Like,
Mhm.
what do you have to there's a wonderful quote that I wanna share with you, from a young lady of all people. So this past in 2022, when I had the balance issue, I wasn't able to run because of my balance issue, so I started, riding a Peloton bike. I think I might have mentioned this to you. I was exploring different, instructors, and I really didn't like any of them, so I just started riding without an instructor because I
Yeah.
wasn't then I came across this one instructor. Her name is Emma Lovewell, and she's a young woman, and she's just so enigmatic. She's just, um, lovely, charismatic, and she has these, like, wonderful little quotes that she just in the middle of a climb, like you're dying, and she'll say something inspirational, uh,
Amazing.
and gets you to the top, so I really, really like her. Very sweet, and she's written a book, which I recently read.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, which I really enjoyed, and, she says something which I think is great. She says, we often say this to our kids, "Make sure you play the piano today, practice makes perfect,"
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And she says, "Practice makes progress, nobody's perfect,"
Oh, I love that.
which is
Oh, I
great.
love that.
we're not perfect. We're
No,
never gonna be perfect.
no.
And we
The
tend to,
striving for perfection is it's
you're just
just
never gonna get there.
no, no, and
But
it's detrimental to us, I
but
think,
progress, we can all strive for progress.
for
We could
sure.
do a little bit better. So that, the question that you asked, what could you do? What could you do today? Maybe instead of eating the bacon and eggs for breakfast, let's try something different. Let's try oatmeal,
Mhm.
and let's try some blueberries and some raspberries. And or even if you have to have the eggs, okay, let's do a little bit of that, but then let's add in the fresh fruit
Yeah,
and talk about how all of a sudden the eggs coming from an animal source have no fiber, but now you've added those blueberries and those raspberries or whatever fruit that you enjoy. And, remember those beautiful colors that are popping, what they're doing. They're delivering those anti-carcinogenic nutrients. They're adding those anti-heart disease. I mean, all the benefits that you're getting. And talk about and as you're eating that food, that bright, beautiful, colorful food enriched in fiber, envision how it's modifying your microbiome, how it's improving every aspect of your well-being. It's almost like a meditation, And
yeah,
that's one
yeah.
of the things I did early on is as I consumed this food, like almost envisioning how it's changing my biochemically.
It's
How
yeah, amazing.
so just making one little change at a
Mhm,
time.
mhm.
And journaling what you did. You don't exercise at all. I just can't do. Okay, just 5 minutes.
Yeah.
You don't have to get on the Peloton with Emma Lovewell,
No.
but you can go for a 5-minute walk.
Yes,
You can go for a
yes.
five-minute walk.
You absolutely can.
And you can find ways to make it more fun and interesting. Call up your friend and say, I'm going to go on, I really don't want to go on a walk, but you're going to talk to me for the next 10 minutes, keep me entertained and chat with your girlfriend.
Yeah, yeah.
Find something that almost like habit stacking, like something that you already do, add this on so that it's just like second nature. I call my mom in the morning, every morning. So when I call her, I'm always like either if it's snowing or cold here, I'm on the treadmill, and if it's on, I'm outside. So she knows, "Are you in the celery farm? That's the nature preserve right down the street from where I live." "Yes, mom, I'm at the nature preserve." And she's like,
I
"Well, where
love
are you?" Because she knows, because she's walked it with me.
yeah, yeah.
So I talk to her and I'm
Okay.
walking. Like, so when I'm gonna call mom, that means walking. So you see how I've
Love it.
connected.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
And then,
Brilliant.
again, every aspect. So I've addressed my diet, my physical activity, my social connections. Social connections are so important. They're medicine. So how do we don't want to be isolated. We don't want to be alone. Of course, everyone needs a little bit of alone time, but it's so important for us to make those social connections. So call Maruja, check in on her. How is she doing? Have a conversation with her. This weekend, I'm going to New York City to have brunch with my best friend, Kathy, who I've known for, 20 to 30 years. We're going to meet up. We're going to go to a museum and then we're going to have brunch. So this is feeding my soul. These social
Absolutely.
talking to my mother, meeting up with my sister, having those hugs and kisses and
Mhm.
all of those wonderful things are so important for us to have those connections. So whenever you feel isolated like that, reach out to someone. Everyone has someone, and you don't
Mhm.
have to have 100 people. You just have to have that one person that
Right.
no matter what, is going to pick up the phone when you call them, isn't going to let it go to voicemail, and is going
Ah,
to respond to you, right? Um,
yeah.
Substance abuse is something that I think is important, particularly in a world where alcohol is everywhere. We use
When it's
alcohol,
normalized.
it's normalized in every social situation. I know I mentioned I have a daughter in college. Going to college is synonymous with drinking. I have a really big problem. Thankfully, my daughter is not part of that. At least I don't think so. She's not. Um,
It's
but,
a good
and it's very, very normalized, and, in our country, you have to be 21 years old to drink, but these kids are not 21, and they're all drinking, and it's completely normalized.
yeah.
Nobody's getting, kicked out of school for drinking. It's just part of the what we need to change that culture.
Yes.
Wherever we go to a game, everybody's drinking too much.
Mhm.
Listen, I enjoy a glass of wine on occasion. I
Mhm.
never drink to get numb or I never drink to um release my inhibitions. Like that's another reason people might drink. I
Mhm.
drink because I enjoy really good wine,
Yeah.
and I never have more than 2 glasses. 99% of the time, I have 1 glass with a really nice dinner. If it's like a wedding or it's some,
A
extraordinary
special occasion.
event, I might have 2 glasses, but I'm never to a point where I'm tipsy or I don't know. And so much of what we do, what we engage in is to get numb.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know? In the
Yeah.
US, I don't know what it's like in Europe, but in the US, there's mass legalization of marijuana,
Mhm.
uh, and so there's a lot of marijuana use, and we don't really understand the long-term effects of that. Uh,
Right.
I I understand there's some medicinal benefits to, using marijuana, but I'm always worried about numb
When you're
utilizing
numbing something. Yeah.
numbing something. Yeah,
Yeah.
and, the opioid epidemic that occurred, this was in the 1990s. We were being pushed
Yeah.
to address pain in every patient, even patients that weren't complaining about pain. We had to document, Maruja, every patient on that little scale. Do you remember that scale of pain, 0
Yeah.
to 10?
Yeah. Yeah.
We had to and if they hit a certain number, we had to give them something. That was the
That's crazy.
that was the pharmaceutical industry, and
Right.
that was money, and that was terrible, and it
Yeah.
led to
To this whole yeah,
whole
whole
thing. And then,
crisis.
we have this epidemic of depression, particularly with young people, and the role that social media is playing in all of this, um, which really concerns me. And I think we have so much to do to help give individuals the skill sets to help manage their own challenges in life, and that
Yeah.
it not be, you know, a joint or a glass of wine or a drug or whatever it is that they're using to numb the pain, but really trying to get down to the root causes. Like, what is eliciting
Causing
this?
what is
Yeah,
it? Yeah.
what is
Yeah.
causing this pain?
Yeah.
Um,
Because like we were talking about that earlier, right? We need the pain. An individual needs
we need
pain,
we need the pain.
physically, emotionally. I mean, it's part of the journey. Of course, you don't want that to be like, it's like the overarching, feeling,
Have
but
You have to have both, right? If you
yeah,
don't have the pain, you don't know what joy is.
joy is exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, and we may be joyful and we may be very happy at this moment, but pain will come. It's just part of
Of
life.
life,
And
exactly. And if we
so
just learn how to manage that in a healthy way, through journaling, meditation, prayer, just talking to somebody. It's like all of these things that
talking
you're talking about are so important to
absolutely.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that's the way, and there's no easy way. You gotta get through it.
You do,
And
you do.
uh but guess what? When you're on the other side of it, something really extraordinary happens.
Yeah,
There's growth.
absolutely. Yeah.
Um, you learn, what I'll give you an example. When you exercise, when you lift weights,
Mhm,
the next day you have that soreness.
mhm.
Why do you have that soreness? Because you're actually ripping muscle fibers when you're doing that weight, right?
Yep, yep.
But then with rest and consuming appropriate nutrients and doing all of it, what happens? It rebuilds and it rebuilds to stronger, and we get stronger. But it's interesting. In order to get stronger, you have to actually
You have to go
destroy.
through yeah.
Yeah.
You have
You
to
have
destroy it. That's
Yeah.
the
You have
yeah,
you have to tear down what you have in order to rebuild stronger. And that's
yeah,
how we
yeah.
get strong.
Absolutely,
We
and it's physically and emotionally as well, and mentally as well.
Yeah.
You peel.
Thing.
I always say you peel the layers of the onion so you can get to the core. And it's not an easy thing to do. A lot of us don't, and it's so like with the noise around us with social media. It's so easy. And you scroll. And I keep telling my kids, I don't want you to get. They're not allowed to have social media yet my eldest is 13, and I because I've worked a lot with social media, and I just think he's too young to be sucked into that world.
Right.
But even with YouTube Short, like they watch YouTube and YouTube Short, I said this thing, there's two things that happen. Your attention span gets so limited, and also you become it trains you to become judgmental because you judge, is this worthy of my watching or it is not? So it's a judgment call every single time.
The likes and it's
Yeah, exactly. And so it's that noise, that constant noise that we just have to, just find a way to just kind of like let all of that find the quiet and the peace because it's such an important part of our
yeah.
lives.
What's an
Yeah.
important thing is it, trying to being mindful of how much time you're on that phone.
Yeah.
And making taking the steps to just put it aside and not like it's not in your immediate environment because
Yeah.
it's there it's we're addicted to that phone. And I know that I consciously make an effort to put the phone in a different room. I never take the phone into anywhere where I'm writing or I'm trying to do something creative, because it's distracting. The only
Yeah.
reason I take the phone into at night is because if my mother needs me and needs
Yes.
to call me if
Yeah.
there's an emergency. But outside, but oh, you should never look at your phone when you're in bed or any time before, within an hour or two of sleeping, because that affects
Just
melatonin.
to fix this.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm still I often do very well for a period and then I have like
yeah,
this,
yeah.
and
Because
like but
first, when you
it's
mention it, you're mindful, and so you might but then it flips.
yeah.
So, you have to, again, that's why the journaling is so good before you go
Mhm.
to bed is just because then it'll remind you, and as you do this more and more, you become more and more mindful, you'll be it'll be easier to not look at that phone, particularly
Yeah.
before connect the dots between poor sleep and looking at your
And
phone.
looking at your phone. Yeah. This has been so, so good. And I'd love to give our listeners or viewers something to take away. And so we're gonna together create, and Soraya has been so good to help create a freebie for you, just a guide with a little bit of, with the six spokes of the wheel, and just to give you help along the way as you're introducing it. So if you go to marufaboga.com/health, you will be able to get that. And we'll put a link to what's missing from medicine and to code blue. It's absolute for me. Like I said, it. You've changed you honestly have been such an incredible inspiration and have changed my life. And this book has changed my life. And it's so, so good to have done this today. Is there anything like, it, okay, let me just turn it around on you before we close.
Yeah.
What inspires you to keep going? What inspires you to do what you do? Or what inspires you in the grander scheme of things?
I I I think for me, it's when the light when I see someone have that aha moment, that's like fuel for my soul. I think I shared this with you recently that somebody sent me an email just recently that they had seen Code Blue and it sparked something, created change, and they just feel so good and they wanted to send me a note. I get email like that often,
Amazing.
or messaging on social media
Hmm.
from all over the world. And that to me, I don't know what it is, Madhua, but it's what fuels me, and it makes me want to continue going. And in the next couple of months, I had taken about a year and a half off, but now I'm sort of swinging back into things. Going to do some talks at medical schools. So that I'm excited about that. My hope is really, and I say this all the time. It's in the book, but really, it truly is that each and every one of us lives to our greatest potential, free of chronic disease. And on that last day on planet Earth, that it be a joy filled day surrounded by family, friends, those you love. And on that day, that you have the most delicious, nutritious meal ever that you can't believe each bite. It's just amazing. And you're sitting beside the person you love most. And on that day, you dance and
Ah.
sing, and you listen to Maruja singing, uh,
Ah.
and then at the end of the day, you get into bed with a smile on your face, you fall asleep peacefully, and then you don't wake up. And
Hmm.
And that's my goal.
Yeah.
Because I think so many years of my life, I worked in a nursing home, and I saw the pain and suffering of patients, and living stare contracted, staring at the wall, in pain, not knowing who they were,
Oh,
and there's so much suffering at the end of life.
mhm.
And then not only suffering for them, but suffering for the family members who
Oh
love
God.
them
Yes.
and have to
Yes.
witness that
Yes.
those end of life issues, and it's so sad.
Yeah.
Um, and I think in large part, obviously, those endings will happen because it's inevitable, but we could prevent so much of that. We could reduce that burden.
Yeah.
And if we could do that, I mean, what could be more important as a physician, somebody who's sworn to serve my community? What could be better than that, than to have that we're all going to die, but we want it to be on our own terms. We want it to be with dignity, with grace, and with peace.
Yeah.
That's my hope for each and every one of us.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. I love you from all my heart. And
Love
this
you.
was so great. Mwah, thank you. And uh, can't wait to see what else you do. Because if there's one thing that I'm sure about is that the world needs to hear from you.
Thank you, my love. It's been a great pleasure.
Pleasure is all mine.